Joe McNamara has spent her entire career being the person who sees the trap before everyone else. She is the one who walks into rooms where nobody else understands what is happening, connects pieces that look completely unrelated, and makes the decision everyone else is too afraid to make. But Season 3, Episode the 2nd of May have just revealed the one thing Joe never expected to happen to her. She may have walked into a trap that was designed specifically for someone like her. Because the terrifying part about Joe being attacked in her own home isn't simply that Russia found her. The terrifying part is that whoever exposed her appears to have known exactly where to look, exactly when to strike, and possibly exactly what the CIA would do in response. And if Joe is right that the Ukrainian operative betrayed them, then the capture of Yurimov may not have been a victory at all. It may have been the first move in a much bigger operation, one where Joe wasn't the hunter, she was the target. Let's start with the detail that makes the entire situation feel wrong. The Russians had opportunities to attack Joe before. They had eyes on her. Joe herself points this out during the debrief. If Russia knew about her involvement in the Ukraine operation, why wait until she was back inside the United States? Why allow her to return home? Why allow the Lioness team to believe the mission had succeeded? And most importantly, why attack her in a way that was clearly designed to create maximum political pressure? These weren't random criminals. They weren't improvising because they suddenly discovered who Joe was. They knew enough about her routine to approach her house when she was vulnerable. They knew she was important, and they knew she had something worth finding inside her body. That means somebody gave them information. The question is who? Joe's own answer is the Ukrainian operative who helped lead the CIA to Alexei Yurimov. On the surface, this is the obvious explanation. The timing is almost too perfect. The Lioness operation gets a major intelligence breakthrough. Joe's team captures Yurimov. They return home. Then, almost immediately, Joe is attacked on American soil. Joe doesn't need 20 different variables to explain it. She sees the simplest connection. The Ukrainian source gave them Yurimov, and shortly afterward the Russians knew enough to come after Joe. But there is another question hiding underneath that theory. What if the intelligence wasn't false? What if the Ukrainian operative really did lead the CIA to Yurimov, but Russia wanted them to find him? That possibility changes everything. Because Joe introduces another disturbing idea during the debrief. What if the man they captured isn't Yurimov at all? What if he's an actor, a substitute, someone deliberately placed in the right position so the CIA would believe they had captured one of Russia's most important officers? Think about how dangerous that would be. The CIA doesn't need to be lied to completely. They only need to be given enough truth to construct the wrong conclusion themselves. That's the perfect intelligence trap. Give them a real location. Give them a real target. Give them a person who looks convincing enough. Give them just enough confirmation to make everyone celebrate the operation. Then watch what happens next. The CIA brings Yurimov into custody. The operation becomes a success. The people involved return home. The Russians suddenly have a reason to retaliate. And now Joe's identity is exposed. That's not just revenge, that's information warfare. And this is where the Ukrainian operative becomes far more interesting than simply being the traitor. Because if she really betrayed Joe, the question isn't only who she works for. The bigger question is what she was instructed to accomplish. Was she supposed to deliver Yurimov? Was she supposed to expose Joe, or was she supposed to make the CIA believe that the two things were connected? Because those are three very different missions. The episode is practically screaming at us to look at the timing. Joe says the Russians had ample opportunity to make her in the field, yet they didn't. Then she meets a Ukrainian double agent who suddenly provides an enormous intelligence prize. The CIA takes the bait, captures Yurimov, and returns to the United States. Then Joe is attacked. That sequence is too clean to ignore. The operation may have been designed to create the exact conditions that made Joe vulnerable. And Byron Westfield's confrontation with the Russian ambassador makes this even more disturbing. Maxim tells him, "There is a line, Byron, and you crossed it." Byron's response is basically that the line doesn't matter anymore. And then Maxim says, "Now there is no line." That isn't just political trash talk. It establishes the new rules of the conflict. Whatever boundaries existed between covert operations abroad and direct attacks at home have collapsed. But what if that collapse was the entire point? The Ukraine operation may have been the excuse Russia needed to escalate. If Russia could make the United States believe it had captured Yurimov through Ukrainian intelligence, then Russia could respond aggressively without immediately revealing what it knew about the Lioness program. They could attack Joe while maintaining plausible deniability. And now Washington is forced to react. That's why Joe's kidnapping is more important than it initially appears. The Russians don't simply kill her, they take her alive. They strip her, they threaten her, they search for her tracker, they want information. That means Joe's value isn't just symbolic. They believe she knows something. And this creates another major question. What exactly are they trying to learn from Joe? If they already know who she is, they don't need confirmation. If they only wanted revenge for Yurimov, killing her would be enough. But they keep her alive. They search her body for a tracker. They want to locate whatever technology or information she may be carrying. And when Joe finally tells them where the tracker is, the story makes a point of showing us that the CIA immediately races toward the location, only to discover that the tracker has been removed and Joe is gone. That means the Russians understood the CIA response. They knew the tracker would trigger a rescue operation, which raises the possibility that even Joe's tracker was part of the game. Imagine how valuable it would be to know exactly how the CIA responds when one of its senior officers is compromised. You don't need to infiltrate Langley if you can simply force them to reveal their procedures. Joe's kidnapping becomes a live experiment. The Russians watch what happens. The CIA mobilizes. Assets move. Teams respond. And somewhere inside that chain of reactions, someone gets exposed. That may explain why Joe's team immediately goes after the Ukrainian operative. Kyle and Cruz don't simply bring her in for a casual conversation. They abduct her from a bar and tell her she has a lot of explaining to do. That's not the behavior of an organization that believes this is just a routine intelligence discrepancy. Joe has convinced them that something is fundamentally wrong with the operation. But here's where I think the real twist could be hiding. What if Alexandra Balakin isn't the mastermind? What if she's only another piece? Joe assumes the Ukrainian source is the simplest explanation because the source is the last major variable introduced before the attack. That's logical. But intelligence operations rarely collapse because of one person. There are usually layers. A source can be manipulated. A source can be compromised. A source can believe they're helping one side while unknowingly serving another. And that could be exactly what happened here. Alexandra may genuinely believe she was helping the CIA capture Yurimov. She may have been given intelligence that was technically accurate. She may even have believed Yurimov was the real target. But if Russia deliberately fed information into the Ukrainian network, then Alexandra doesn't have to be a Russian agent at all. She only has to be useful. That's much scarier, because then Joe isn't hunting a traitor. She's hunting the mechanism that created the traitor. And this could explain why the episode spends so much time emphasizing Joe's instincts. She isn't making accusations because she's emotional. She's looking at variables. She sees that Russia never attacked her before. She sees the timing of the Ukrainian intelligence. She sees the speed of the retaliation. And she questions whether the biggest prize they captured was even real. Joe is already thinking 2 moves ahead. But there is one thing she hasn't fully considered. What if Russia wanted her to think exactly that? What if the Ukrainian operative is supposed to look guilty? What if Joe's suspicion is itself part of the trap? Because once the CIA starts interrogating its own source, the agency begins burning relationships, exposing networks, and potentially creating new enemies. The Russians don't necessarily need to infiltrate the CIA directly. They can manipulate the people around it until the CIA starts dismantling its own intelligence structure. And that would make Joe's greatest strength, her ability to distrust everything, potentially her biggest vulnerability. The episode's non-linear timeline makes this even more interesting. We already know Joe eventually gets kidnapped. We know the first attack didn't end the story. We know the second attack is worse. So the question isn't whether Joe survives. The question is, what does she discover between these 2 events that makes someone desperate enough to take her? Because there is clearly information being withheld. We don't yet know exactly what happens between the first attack and the later kidnapping. We don't know how Alexandra's interrogation plays out. We don't know whether Yurimov is genuine. And we don't know whether Russia is acting alone. But the episode has already given us one enormous clue. The Russians are no longer simply reacting to the CIA. They are anticipating it, and if that's true, then somebody is feeding them information. That brings us back to Joe's family. One of the strongest scenes in the episode isn't an interrogation or a firefight. It's Josie, sitting beside Joe's sleeping daughters. Kate asks whether she knows karate. Josie simply confirms that she has a gun. Kate responds that a gun beats karate. That scene matters because Joe's war is no longer staying outside the house. The Lioness operation has crossed the boundary that was supposed to protect the people Joe loves. And now, even the next generation is seeing what this life looks like. Joe's daughters aren't being told about the world their mother operates in. They're watching it happen around them. That's exactly what makes Joe's situation so dangerous. She can't simply disappear. She can't walk away. And she can't trust that going back to the CIA will protect her, because the attack has already proven that the war can follow her home. So here's my prediction for where Season 3 is heading. Joe will eventually discover that her original theory was only partially correct. The Ukrainian operative did play a role in the deception, but Yurimov is the real key. The person the CIA captured may not be the man they thought he was, and whatever happened in Ukraine was designed to create a chain reaction that would expose the Lioness team. The Russians didn't need to kill Joe. They needed to understand her. They needed to know how she operates, who protects her, how the CIA responds when she disappears, and how far Washington is willing to go after an attack on one of its most valuable officers. And if the real Yurimov is still out there, then the CIA may have spent the entire season chasing the wrong man. That would make the title of this entire mystery much darker. Because Joe believes she's hunting the people who betrayed her. But what if she's actually walking through a battlefield that was constructed specifically for her? The most dangerous enemy in Lioness Season the 3rd of may not be the Russian officer, the Ukrainian operative, or even the people who came to Joe's house. It may be the person who understood exactly how Joe would respond and built the entire operation around that response. Joe has always been the weapon. This time, someone may have figured out how to point her in the wrong direction.